Well, hello everyone, and thanks for joining. Today we will explore what SS7 threats looks like in 2025, including attacks, data leaks, and the latest security bypass techniques. So who we are? I'm Ayman El-Sharif. I have over 12 years of experience in cybersecurity with a focus on the telecom domain. I work as a telecom cybersecurity expert at SecurityGen, focusing on vulnerability research of telecom protocols and systems, and in carrying out assessments for mobile operators, security assessments. Now I will hand it over to Kirill for his introduction.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kirill Puzankov, and I have over 15 years of experience in cybersecurity, which, as you can understand, the majority of is referred to telco security, right? So I'm currently taking the position of product offering manager and SecurityGen, right? And we've been exploring the telco threats, vulnerabilities, starting from the SS7 protocol up to 5G, right? And our main focus of our team, right, is just growing solutions inside for protection of mobile core network, as well as the provisioning of visibility and DIs for the network security posture.
Thank you, Kirill. So here is the roadmap for today's talk. We will start with a quick introduction to set the scene. First, we will walk you through how surveillance operations are abusing SS7 today into 2025. Then we will look at some data leaked from the telecom world, showing how big tech companies are routing sensitive SMS traffic through untrusted intermediaries. And after that, we will give a short refresher on the SS7 protocol. The second part is where it gets more interesting. New SS7 firewall bypass techniques. I will cover two of them here. One is a brand new, discovered in our own research, and the other was observed in the surveillance operation that we will be talking about. Finally, we'll wrap up with mitigation strategies, what operators can do to detect and stop such kind of attacks. So let's get started. According to a research reported by TechCrunch, a new SS7 attack has been active since late 2024. It was part of a targeted surveillance operation by a company in the Middle East. The actor carried out the attack using SS7 messages sent over the global interconnect network, the same network that mobile operators rely on to exchange traffic and connect calls and SMSs between each other. And the goal of these messages is to track location of their victims. For a network to deliver a call or SMS, it has to know where each subscriber is, or which cell identity or cell tower he is currently connected to. Later, we will take a look at how this works and how accurate it can get. The research, which was carried out by ENIA, found that attackers were able to carefully tweak the messages so that they can bypass signaling firewall. These firewalls are deployed by mobile operators to block attacks on telecom signaling protocols and keep their network safe. So by bypassing them, attackers are essentially finding a way around these defenses, slipping past the protections and carrying out their attacks. We will get exactly how that worked out later when we discuss the bypass techniques in this section. What's important is that this incident points to a bigger trend. Surveillance vendors keep adjusting and adapting their techniques, and we can expect more of these attacks to happen in future. ENIA has been tracking several of these vendors for years. In fact, the actor behind this case matches a surveillance company they have followed for a long time. This company runs a distributed system for SS7 attacks, launching them from different or multiple countries. Its main base in the Middle East, with additional infrastructure in Europe, Africa, and Asia. The systems are built to get around the signaling defenses, and they keep adjusting their techniques from now and then. This constant evolution, combined with the distributed infrastructure they are using, shows just how advanced the surveillance industry has become. Even though these companies usually work with the government clients, usually history shows the tools often get used against journalists, human rights defenders, and sometimes against political opponents. And here is a telling fact. One of the oldest protocols, SS7, is still a favorite tool for the surveillance companies. Let's compare it, or let's put this next to spyware, for example. If you recall NSO Group, the company behind the Pegasus malware, Pegasus was a mobile malware or spyware that became famous for its so-called zero-click exploits, meaning that you don't need to click a link or open a file, for example. These attacks trigger silently, so something like an incoming VoIP call or a chat message, for example. But user doesn't have to click anything or do any action. It's automatically executed on the device. But no matter how advanced, it still requires something to reach the victim, even no action is required from his side. And in some cases, the victim notices something and the attack gets exposed. For SS7, it's different. It doesn't need you to touch the device at all. Nothing shows on the phone, and yet surveillance companies can still track the victims, intercept their communications, or locate them. And that puts the responsibility mainly on the telecom operators and the carriers that connect them. They are the one who can defend against this type of attack and stop it. End users are helpless. They have nothing to do about it. Now let's switch gears and look at a leak that clearly revealed just how vulnerable telecom infrastructure can be. Earlier this year, Lighthouse Reports, in collaboration with Bloomberg, published findings based on a dataset of around 100 million packets. All of these packets were captured in just a single week from a service provider or telecom provider called Think Telecom Services, a provider that the report linked to the surveillance industry. What stood out was that large part of this traffic was SS7 messages carrying A2P SMS content or application to people SMS. These messages were routed to people in more than 170 countries. That's almost 90% of the entire world. And inside those messages, there were two-factor authentication codes for major big tech companies. Usually, when you get such SMS, two-factor authentication login, for example, it doesn't come straight from the app you are using or from your bank. It passes through several middlemen like contractors or subcontractors before it lands on your phone. The leaked data exposed codes from companies like Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, and even from secure messaging apps like Signal. These codes are very sensitive. In the wrong hand, they can be abused to gain unauthorized access to people accounts. As you can see, we have a long list of Google, Facebook, Tinder with hundreds of thousands of SMSs in just 1 week. And it didn't stop there. The leak also contained hundreds of SMS from active surveillance campaigns. They carried real-time operational details like names of people under surveillance, their movements, and even their car registration numbers. These messages were likely sent to the people operating these surveillance operations or surveillance campaign. And even more concerning, these messages or SMS were sent in clear text, meaning that any middleman or anyone in the chain could be able to see such sensitive information. And it wasn't just SMS. The dataset also contained SS7 geolocation lookups, the kind of requests used to pinpoint subscriber location with high accuracy. These lookups used a message called provide subscriber location, or PSL. In normal usage, these messages support location-based services for mobile operators. It can locate subscribers with high accuracy using different techniques. For example, it can take signal measurements from several nearby cell towers near the user and combine them to pinpoint a subscriber location with high accuracy. It works like how GPS systems works. Usually GPS systems use signal from multiple satellites to pinpoint your location. And this technique works the same, but by using the cell towers instead of satellites. This special method directly returns the coordinates of the subscriber in terms of longitude and latitude. The accuracy depends on the method. It can locate users as I highlighted using different methods. So it depends on the method used to locate the user, but it can be very high, sometimes down to just tens of meters. And that's exactly the kind of accuracy surveillance companies are after. As you can see, we have, in the response, we have latitude, longitude, and uncertainty radius, for example. Also, it turned out that some of the SS7 messages carrying SMS content has been intentionally altered to look malformed or to look broken. The sending network used a known bypass technique called global opcode. By tweaking the messages to appear broken or malformed, they were able to hide the SMS content from intermediate nodes, some intermediate nodes, while still delivering it to its final destination. This can be a trick used to trick other mobile operators' billing systems, most probably to offer cheaper rates, cheaper SMS delivery rates. And that could be explained why SMS for major companies sometimes end up being routed through these providers, mainly for their cheap rates. It was highlighting that the same manipulation technique was used in SS7 location lookup messages, but most probably as a way to bypass security policing or security filtering implemented by the target operators. This leak really highlights something important. Major tech brands are entrusting their sensitive traffic to untrusted providers. They may not choose and Telegram account takeovers were taking place in multiple countries in Africa. Victims received calls and SMSs with one-time passwords, but attackers intercepted them and used these passwords or codes to create or hijack their accounts. Later, they used this account for spam, phishing, and some bot operations. For example, in one country, over 150,000 Telegram accounts were fraudulently registered in less than an hour. And all of this is likely happening because these authentication calls or SMSs were routed through cheap providers, untrusted ones. Unfortunately, companies or maybe the contractors often pick up the cheapest and fastest routes instead of the safer or secure routes to deliver such kind of messages. Now let's take a moment and start with a quick overview of the SS7 protocol. So what is SS7? It's a signaling system used in 2G and 3G networks. Basically, it carries the instructions that set up calls, deliver SMS, handle mobility or roaming, and support other telephony services. Mobile networks are made up of many parts. Some deals with the radio side, like connecting your phone to the cell towers, while others handle core internal functionalities. And just like people need a way to communicate with each other, these network elements, that's when signaling comes. That's SS7. SS7 also connects mobile operators worldwide, not just in internal networks or core network, through an international backbone called IPX. And unlike the public internet, for example, IPX is a closed environment used by mobile operators, VAS providers, or SMS aggregators, and even by security companies themselves. But access isn't as restricted as it sounds. For example, Think Telecom Services isn't the only gray company with access to IPX. There are plenty of these companies with access. Also, some of them get access through rogue employees inside mobile operators on black market. They try to offer or purchase access through insider employees, or sometimes they get access through hacked telecom equipment. When some actor or ABT, for example, hack telecom equipments, they can sometimes use it to send attacks to other mobile operators abusing IPX. And of course, Big Brothers always have its way into. All of these passes open the door to serious threats. SS7 has been misused by adversaries for many years. Even though many operators now implement defenses like signaling firewalls and apply policing on the network element itself, attackers continue to adapt, always finding new ways to bypass these controls every few months. SS7 threats are well documented. Things like intercepting calls and SMSs, location tracking, financial fraud, and even denial of service attacks. Now let's look at the protocol stack. SS7 is not a single protocol. It's a complex stack of protocols that break down communications into layers, each layer responsible for a specific task. At the lower layers, you have physical connectivity and transport, and as you move up the stack, the higher layers mainly handle signaling and application level services. For our purpose, we will focus on just one layer, TCAP, or the transaction capability application part. The bypass techniques we will see later take advantage of how this layer is structured and encoded. This layer sits on the upper part of the stack and they provide transactional mechanism to the SS7 protocol, mainly managing multiple message exchanges between two nodes at the same time, communicating using SS7. You can think of it like, for example, a waiter in a busy restaurant, keeping track of different tables, their orders, so that nothing gets mixed. When it comes to encoding, TCAP follows a standard way of structuring data called ASN.1 or Abstract Syntax Notation 1, and it uses a method called BER or Basic Encoding Rules. It's basically a way to format data into binary form so that it can be transmitted over the network. It takes, for example, the content of upper layer messages like MAP or TCAP layer, encoded into binary format to be able to send over the network to other SS7 nodes. This method, BER, is a flexible encoding rule. It gives several options for how data values can be encoded, meaning that the same parameter, for example, can be encoded using different ways to binary data and being sent over the network. And the receiver on the other side need to be able to understand these different techniques for encoding the same thing and be able to understand it. But the main problem is that this flexibility also can be risky, mainly because some implementations on the receiver side don't handle it properly while decoding the received message, and attackers usually take advantage of these mistakes. At the core, it relies on a simple structure called type length value, or TLV for short. Each piece of data starts with a type identifier or a tag, then the length, and finally the actual value is encoded. The actual value itself can be something primitive like a number or a single number or a series of digits, or a more complex structure which is built from multiple elements, a complex type, for example. Let's take an example, the MSISDN parameter, which is basically the phone number you dial on your phone. It can be encoded in some SS7 messages using a special type identifier or tag of 80 in hexadecimal, followed by the length of the MSISDN. In this case, it was 8 bytes. And then finally, the actual MSISDN value. This is how an MSISDN would look like in some SS7 messages when it's encoded using this or encoded inside TCAP. This concludes the protocol overview. We tried to keep it short and focused. And now we have reached what I think is the most interesting part of this talk, the bypass techniques. I will begin with a brand new technique that we uncovered during our research. We have called it TCAP dialog manipulation. These techniques take advantage of part of the TCAP protocol called the dialog portion. This part is what maintains conversation between two TCAP users, and it also negotiates the services they are using. It follows the same TLV structure for encoding. First comes tag, length, and finally a value. Here you can see our Wireshark trace showing a message called send routing info for SM, which is part of the SMS delivery service or procedure in SS7. The highlighted sections shows the dialog portion. It contains multiple elements, but most importantly, the dialog BDU itself, this part. Okay. In this case, it's a dialog request for SMS services. One end is requesting an operation related to SMS from another end. And this service is identified through this application context name, or ACN. These parameters identify which services the sender is interested in. For our purpose, we will focus only on the length fields inside the TLV. Other details are not important. Okay? Generally, each element inside this part has its own length. For example, we have one field that holds the total length of the dialog portion, while another field holds the length of the inner dialog BDO, the dialog request in this case. Okay? As you can see, two fields are there and encoded in Wireshark. The first one is 1A and the second one is 0D. In theory, if you change any of these fields, the packet should be corrupted and the receiver should not be able to understand it. But in practice, not all length fields are handled the same. For example, the length of this inner dialog BDU should match or should be equal to the length of the total dialog portion minus the length of the intermediate elements, this one. And since those elements are mandatory and always present in messages, the value of this inner length field should be determined or should be able to be determined even if it's corrupted. Okay. At first, we thought this could be a potential bypass. We suspected that the decoders in firewalls and the core network elements might handle it differently. Usually, core network decoders often tolerate bad inputs if they can still read the message, mainly to avoid any potential impact. They try to read the message with the minimum data they can. So in our field tests, we increased the length of this, the value of this length field, and our assumption was correct. The packet passed straight through the firewall, and the targeted network accepted it, returning back successful responses. Let's look at how this simple tweak were able to bypass the firewall. In most deployments, SS7 firewall runs in loopback mode, setting alongside the STP. The STP is the node which routes SS7 messages between network elements. The STPs passes all incoming messages to the firewall. The firewall then decides whether to accept or block the message, depending on its configured rules. If the message is accepted, the firewall forwards it internally through the STP again until it reaches its destination. In this case, it reaches the HLR. So first, we sent a regular ATI message or anytime interrogation message. This message lets you ask for a subscriber location and status, for example, whether he is in a call or he is idle or he is disconnected from the network. And you can use this message using either MSISDN, the phone number, or MZ, which is another identifier the network uses for its subscribers. When this message reaches the STP, as usual, it was forwarded to the firewall. And since this is a category 1 message, an internal message, it should not be accepted from external networks. All security devices are configured to block such kind of messages. So the message was blocked, and we didn't receive any response. In the second trial, we changed the length of the inner dialog BDU, this one, 11. We just increased its value. The new value, 3P. As you can see, the message is now malformed, and Wireshark can't even decode it. If you check this part, Wireshark can't decode anything past this dialog, and it considers it as malformed. When we send the modified message, as expected, the firewall couldn't pass it because of this corrupted length field, and hence it didn't match any rule inside the firewall. It couldn't determine whether this is a category 1 message, category 2, or what is this kind of message. And since many operators configure the firewall to simply pass through anything it can't understand, mainly to avoid false positives, and that's exactly what happened in our case. The message was forwarded again and reached HLR. Unlike the previous message, provide subscriber location, this message doesn't give you coordinates of the subscriber. It only gives the cell identity that the user is connected to. So how could we turn this cell identity into a location? Well, there are multiple online services with massive databases of cell IDs collected from real phones all over the world. These databases maps cell tower IDs into the approximate locations. So by using some of these services, we were able to obtain a rough location of the test cell. The accuracy for this location depends on the network setup and the generation in use. It can be anywhere from few meters to few dozens kilometers. That's how we discovered a bypass technique that works across all SS7 message category 1 2, and 3, mainly because for affected firewalls, it's considered corrupted, and it can determine the category of this message even. So it works against all categories. Of course, the success of this technique isn't universal. It depends on the specific implementation of SS7 message parsers or decoders of the firewalls and the core network elements, meaning that some vendors can be affected while others cannot. The next technique is called TCAP tag extension. This is a technique used by the surveillance company we talked about. This one takes advantage of how parameters like MSISDN or MZs inside TCAP layers are encoded. These parameters follow the same TLV structure. Here is a Wireshark trace of the same message, send routing info for SCM. The highlighted section shows the component portion, where all parameters are encoded. For example, here you can see the MSISDN parameter. Here you can see the global title of SMS center, and all parameters get encoded inside this part. This time we will focus only on the lens tag, on the tag field from the TLV part. As I mentioned earlier, tags are type identifier. They tell the receiver what the parameter represents. For example, whether this parameter represents an MZ, a global title, an MSISDN, or what is the identity of this parameter. Normally, tags are just 1 byte length, and they can hold values up to 30 or 1E in hexadecimal. However, the standard also supports larger values through something called extended tags, which can encode tags in more than 1 byte and support larger values. But usually, those kind of formats, extended tags, are not commonly used in mobile networks. Only the short form is used. And here is the interesting part. It seems that some firewalls didn't implement the logic to handle extended tags properly. Instead, they just created them as a broken. As per the standard, there is no restriction that extended tags should only be used for values over 30. You can use the extended tag for smaller values, and usually receivers should be able to handle it. But seems that some firewalls didn't implement this logic, mainly because this form is not used commonly in mobile networks. We tried to replicate the same technique during our field tests by changing the tag value of MZ parameter inside a message called insert subscriber data, or ISD. This kind of message can be used to code denial of service for the subscriber, intercept his SMSs and calls, track his activities, and even for fraud cases. So we used the extended tag form. It carried the same tag value of the original one, but just encoded in the extended form, 2 bytes in this case. The modified message went straight through the firewall, and we got a successful response. In this case, it caused a denial of service. Unlike the previous technique, this one only works against GSMA category 2 and 3 messages, not category 1. That's because category 1 messages are usually blocked by firewalls without needing to decode extra parameters like MSISDN or value. Once the firewall determines that this is a category 1 message, it's blocked automatically based on something called opcode or operational code. In series, though, this technique could be applied to any TCAP parameter, like the opcode itself. And if that worked, it could affect the category 1 messages as well. But so far, in our field tests, it only worked against component parameters like MZ and MSISDN. That wraps up the bypass part. Now I'll hand it over to Kirill for the bypass techniques of the mitigation strategies.
Thank you, Ayman. So let's start with actually the reasons of why is that happening, right? So the SS7 protocol stack was designed in 70s, right? And a lot of people already expected that these 2G technologies of the mobile operators, they will actually disappear by this time, right? But it actually took longer, and they're staying with us. So we have to, of course, pay reasonable attention to this, right? So, but why, let's say, some operators actually succeed with the protection and doing quite well, right? So, for example, we see a major noticeable increase in SS7 firewalls, right? But while the others, they still lack of protection, right? So I just wanted to highlight that this telco cybersecurity is not that, let's say, different from the regular cybersecurity IT, right? Of course, it has its own nuances, right? And but let's say the defending strategies, right? The fundamentals that the cybersecurity is being built in telcos, it's still the same. It's just a matter of the knowledge regarding the telco that should be properly applied. So yes, SS7 is still with us, and it's very pity, right, that we still kind of receiving some new bypass techniques from 2025, while, let's say, a lot of companies, right, were shouting about the SS7 protocol being insecure starting like 2008, 2014, etc. But they're still there. And why actually this kind of protocol is being utilized? Yes, because it does remains the easiest path for an attacker to penetrate the network, compared, for example, to the LTE generations, 5G, etc. So if that's still working and the network generation is not discontinued, of course the attacker took the easiest path, right? What's the problem with actually the security means and the equipment, the network equipment that we have in these kind of networks, right? It's because of different decoding and parser techniques used in the equipment, right? So as Ayman correctly mentioned, different kind of nodes will react differently to the packet. Some will act like a more plausible check, right, and will send the packet on a safer side inside the network, right, while the other will just treat something as malformed if it cannot parse, let's say, at least part of it, part of the packet content, and thus, let's say, prevent exploitation with the greater chances. And of course, also the lack of tools for security monitoring and vulnerability management in telco networks. So while it's very common in regular cybersecurity IT, right, in telco networks, maybe it's not that yet mature, unfortunately, right? And of course, we all know that the network has to be protected by the firewall, but moreover, it has to be controlled, and the firewall has to be controlled. So you should have the pair of eyes and checking what's happening in your network and trying to predict the possible exploitation, right? And employ specific security means, right, in order to withstand potential attacks. So when I was referring to the not that much difference between the IT cybersecurity and telco cybersecurity, right? I would like to highlight also that the approach and the distribution of the attacks and tactics that attackers actually utilize, they're the same. So you can still use the same kind of, let's say, NIST approach in telco network. Yes, with some specifics, of course, right? And that's why, let's say, GSMA has released like GSMA motif framework, right? And Mitrified also created this attacks and tactics matrix, which is very similar to the IT world. So, and we also try to simplify, let's say, to create our own approach based on like NIST, right? Similar to NIST, but maybe in a more simplified way. So let me share this. It consists of the three major steps, right? It's called IDP, which is inspection, detection, and protection. So when we talk about the inspection, right? It's about vulnerability management of the network, utilizing some tools like scanners, breach and attack simulations, right? In order to check if the network is actually vulnerable, right, to the known attacks or some possible exposable flaws in the network, right? When we talk about the detection, it's about continuous real-time monitoring of the network perimeter, and the control of the firewall work, right? And it is essential that the security monitoring tools, right, and the firewalls, they utilize different traffic flows so that you can receive the same traffic, but for example, in the traffic in the format of traffic copy, but you understand that there has been a firewall bypass happened, right? While your IDS, for example, will receive the full flow, and you'll be able to analyze and detect it by signature methods or some AI ML-based techniques, right? And protection, of course, it's like more commonly known among all of us, right? It's just addressing the potential attacks with the firewall or next generation firewalls applicable to the mobile core network, right? So, but in order to be effective, right, in these 3 steps, you have to receive the information from some kind of sources, right? And you have to be sure that, for example, if you're doing vulnerability management, your knowledge base is up to date of how that possible could be, right? And here it actually comes the threat-informed defense, right? So how we do it? So we collect the data from offensive testing, of course, because our experts are continuously provide security assessments and provide network security monitoring, right? We also do some research based on, let's say, dark web monitoring, doing incident investigation for the customers, right? So performing some lab research, inventing some, potential techniques, right, that can be used and that can be tested in the networks during the security assessment. Of course, some of the information comes from industry collaboration and OSINT analysis, right? So all this kind of information, right, it's being processed in a specific format, analyzed, right, and it's being integrated into the knowledge base, right? And this knowledge base, of course, should be utilized by all the products, by all the services, right? Even if it's like some kind of a pen test, but the firewalls, the IDS, the breach and attack simulation tool. So right now, I would just like to show an example, like how these 3 steps, like IDP, right, might be achieved, and what kind of, let's say, approach can be utilized. So here you can see like one of the examples of artificial cybersecurity expert, which is breach and attack simulation platform, right? So once you log in, you have some multiple inspection plans that you can create, that you can propagate, etc. And here we are just observing the technique covered by Ayman, right, regarding the attack code extension. So you can utilize it to specific methods like category 2, for example, attacks, right, and inspect your network. So you're not trying to wait until this kind of attack is being detected by the tools, or the net, or even come unnoticed, right, and the network will just provide the positive answer, revealing the information, or let's say allowing to create the denial of service for the network. So that's basically how it works, right? So either utilizing some automatized techniques or tools, right? And also it can be done, of course, like in a manual approach by just ordering security assessment and assessing the network security state, right? So when it comes to the detection and protection example, so here you can see an example of how the detection and the firewall, right, can actually prevent the kind of attacks. Here we have the successful exploitation, right, of the network. Of course, this is simulation, but you can see here that in a map provide subscriber info request, you have this information that the extended IMSI tag was used, which will allow you to understand like why all these kind of, let's say, provide subscriber info requests are being blocked by my firewall, for example. But this one actually came through and the network responded with the information that provided cell global IDs, information which allows actually an attacker to receive the information about the base station location and of course the real location based on the geolocation database that are really open in the internet. And apart from this, let's say regular detection and protection means, right, it's quite important to utilize some, let's say, AI, ML-based techniques, right? For example, here we are just, let's say, showing an example of element profiling techniques where the node has its own profile. And once it changes its behavior, right, it's being detected, it's being shown as, let's say, suspicious. And that lets you, for example, work with the attacks detected more efficient because you already know it has like a star mark that allows you to understand that this kind of node requires precise attention, right? And probably should be blocked. So for the conclusion, right? What's important to do, right? First of all, protection and monitoring the network from multiple angles is essential, right? So you not only just, let's say, implement the firewall and configure it one time, right, and being happy? Of course not. So even with the firewall, you have to continuously, let's say, revise the configuration, right? And what helps you to provide this kind of revisioning is just receiving the information from another sources of like the threat-informed defense, the intrusion detection system, and for example, security assessment, right? So auditing is also very important. And I would like to highlight one more time that it is important to be with continuously updated knowledge base, right? So like once some threat intel report has been released, or let's say once the companies has found some kind of vulnerabilities, of course, if it's being done in our company, we propagate this into our solutions and deliver it to the customer. And that has to be the way for the industry, right? So these threat intelligence subscriptions can actually help you with, let's say, receiving the required info in terms of vulnerabilities found or some extra attack vectors found, right? And that you can be able, right, to go to the vendors that you're working with and ask, like, are you able to test this kind of technique? Is my network vulnerable or not, right? And we are living in the world of progressive technologies, right? And not just utilizing the regular firewalls with the simple ACL approach is enough, right? So some techniques, progressive techniques based on AI ML, has to be used, right, to identify and block malfactor on the early step, right? Because in many cases, even when this sophisticated attack is happening, right, an attacker will actually make himself noticeable because he will try the original, the regular procedures first. So once he does that, you know, a new sophisticated, let's say, attempts might be prevented just by blocking the source, for example, in an automated way, or at least manually, right? But with some kind of visibility and some kind of process built inside the MNO. I think that's it for today from us. Of course, we are open to the questions, and I think our hosts will help us with that.
Thank you so much both for your presentation. And now we will have the question answer session. So the first question is for Kirill. So have you observed this new bypass attempt in the customers you're monitoring? And if so, have you noticed any variations?
Yeah, actually, yes. So when Ayman was referring to the techniques, right, that let's say we are identified, right? So one of the attacks were actually, let's say, found the just through the research, right, and being tested on the network, right? And another one has been noticed at the customer, let's say, we are monitoring for, right? Although it was, let's say, detected after this threat intel report came out, right? Still, of course, as we get this kind of knowledge, either from our own research or from threat intel, right, coming in the community. This kind of attacks, this is not something that, let's say, hidden, right? They do happen in the network. And if you have a pretty, let's say, pretty solid, right, base of customers that you provide, let's say, firewall and monitoring, of course, you will notice that, because the attackers, they're not only focusing on just, let's say, exploiting one operator. They will use these kind of techniques for as much as they can reach.
Okay, thank you. The second question for Iman is, if I wanted to reproduce any of these in the wild, would that be feasible? How legal would it be? And are there any online resources available?
Sorry, Ayman, you're on mute.
Well, in order to be able to reduce such kind of attacks, first for the tools, as Kirill highlighted, we have a knowledge base where we keep it updated with new tactics and techniques constantly, and this knowledge base takes feed from multiple sources, our own research, what we observe in the network, and the public reports. And these techniques are all fed into our products, like Artificial Cybersecurity Expert, where it can be used to produce such kind of messages. Regarding to online resources, basically there are some free and open source tools, but these tools often provide basic functionality, and the main problem is that they are not constantly updated. So for something fresh like these techniques, I'm not sure, but most probably it will not be supported. And on the legal side, sure, any of these activities should be done only after authorization from the target network. Usually we do these activities with our customers after we receive the authorization reports with detailed route of engagement, because it's mainly illegal in almost all countries or many countries.
Okay, thank you. The next question for you is, where do bad actors typically obtain access to SS7?
Okay, as I highlighted, they can gain access using multiple means. First, they can register themselves as a fake service providers, or a service provider that abuses its access. For example, with the rise of virtual mobile operators, an entity can register as a virtual operator, as a VAS provider or SMS aggregator. For example, one of the companies I was talking about is registered as an SMS aggregator. It indeed provides SMS services, but behind the scenes, they're abusing this access. This is one way to get access. Another way is to get indirect access through other entities who have access. For example, you can, on the dark web, for example, you can find requests for SS7 access for mobile operator employees. They offer good amount of money for internal employees so that they can give them indirect access. And in some cases, like for example, the famous Liminal Panda case, where some adversary hacked one of the telecom operators in one country, he was able to abuse its core network and started to attack other networks all over the world. So yes, there are multiple ways. Some are direct, some are not direct.
Thank you. The next question for Kirill is, are all SS7 firewalls affected by these bypasses? Is this mainly a configuration issue or more of a design flaw?
I would say it's both. So first of all, as already mentioned, right, there are different decoding and coding techniques that SS7 firewalls and other security means, even the STP and the end equipment, right, like HLR, VLRs, etc. Depends on how they react to this kind of packet. But a configuration issue is a really big problem, of course. So it can just be like a routing path, right? That's because of the specific settings will be chosen that the packet will not go to the firewall. So the configuration issue is very important, right? But let's say these kind of, let's say, advanced techniques, right? Like the ones we probably just observed today, right? They are mostly, I would say, in the good configured networks, right? They're mostly effective because of the implementation of the stack and realization of the function, based on how the equipment, different equipment, not necessarily the SS7 firewall, actually reacts to the packet that might look malformed, but you still get the required field in order to provide the information or accept the request.
Okay, great. So the next question for you is, what commercial and open source tools are you using to execute or stimulate these attacks?
Like the one of the tools, right, that we shared is the artificial cybersecurity expert, which is a breach and attack simulation platform. So of course, let's say we are building a knowledge base for this based on, let's say, our research, based on the let's say the sources that can be received from threat intelligence, right, and also doing let's say some lab research, right? And of course, we are not just going and testing the operators around the world just to test like how many of them are vulnerable, right? So it's all based on the contracts that we receive, and we utilize this platform. So it's also let's say available to the let's say B2B, right? So to the organizations, to the MNO mostly, but sometimes the integrators can be also the purchaser of this kind of solutions, right? It can be like a managed service, it can be like a service subscription, cloud-based connection, or even the on-site. So if we're talking about, let's say, the tools that are available, for example, for free and for, let's say, just regular customers. If, for example, somehow a person could receive the connection, the access to the SS7, right? In most of the cases, it's going to be either very simplified tools, right, or it's going to be, let's say, some kind of scam that you will meet in the dark web, that I'm selling, for example, the SS7 exploit, SS7 exploitation tool, or the SS7 access. Yes, of course, let's say some of that might be legal, right? But on the other side, many of them actually can be a scam. So like this.
Okay, thank you. So the last question for you is, all SS7 firewalls check and block incoming SS7 requests or attacks. Could we also add outgoing checks, for example, verifying HLR responses or HPLMN requests, even if the initial request was bypassed?
Yeah, so it definitely depends on the configuration. So it's not all the SS7, not all the SS7 firewall that only analyze the incoming traffic. And if we're talking, for example, about the simplified, like category 1 messages, which simply can be, let's say, detected and understood based on the opcode. Of course, if the outgoing direction is being checked, just putting a simple firewall rule, right, based on the opcode, it will allow, even the packet came through, even it bypassed the firewall, right, it will allow the response coming from the HLR, for example, to be just simply blocked. So of course it's a matter of a deployment scheme, and such installations also exist.
Thank you, Kirill. Question for Ayman. Can compromised roaming partners be used as a backdoor for TCAP abuse?
Yes, sure. And as highlighted, it already happened in one of the famous incidents, the Rimel Panda. Any of your roaming partners, when compromised, adversaries can use the core network and the access to IPS to start sending attack messages. Yes.
Thank you. And the last question for Kirill is, what signaling firewall rules are most effective at blocking malicious TCAP operations?
Well, here it's a let's say it's a tricky question, because when we're talking about the TCAP bypasses, right? It's an exploitation of the stack. So it basically it's not about it might not be about the rule configuration, but the parsers, right? The encoding and decoding techniques that are utilized in the firewall. And of course, the firewalls that do allow to treat, let's say, messages as malformed, if they see some kind of inconsistencies, they will help a lot, right, in terms of, let's say, preventing this kind of techniques. So speaking about, let's say, the activation of the malformed part, right, the malformed blocking of malformed packets can help already a lot, right, in terms of these preventive measures. So basically like that. And as we've already mentioned, right, the MNOs might be persistent, to utilize, let's say, malformed blockade because security might be less priority for them than just traffic continuity. And in case, let's say, the legal packet might be blocked. But let's say this is one of the effective ways, but of course, it's a general approach to parsing techniques and coding techniques, and you just have to have a good vendor with good capabilities of this kind of decoding in order to be able to parse the packet properly, right, and understand that this is an attack, this is a hidden attack, etc.
Okay, thank you. And the last question for Eman is, OTPs can be bypassed with SS7 access, right? Is that a real world scenario where dedicated hackers can do that?
Yes, indeed. And every now and then you hear about how SS7 is abused to bypass this OTP. Normally, attackers use SS7 in order to intercept the message incoming with the OTP or even the call itself if OTP is sent on the call. And as I highlighted earlier this year, we observed many cases in Africa where OTPs from WhatsApp and Telegram were intercepted and used by attackers. Yeah.
Okay, thank you guys. Thank you for joining, and it was a great presentation by our speakers today. We will also be sharing the recording with you, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.